I want to continue where we left off yesterday in recalling and appreciating our mothers. And doing that in light of the historic significance of the first woman elected to head a major party ticket for the highest office in our land. As Venerable noted yesterday, we've lagged behind other countries of the world in electing a woman and women to highest office. And recalling none of the women who are in office right now actually got there by themselves, as none of us gets anywhere by ourselves, and thinking about our mothers. As Venerable Children and I met the night that Hillary Clinton won the California primary, we both acknowledged that both of our mothers would be very, 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 very happy, very proud. So regardless of what people think of Hillary Clinton's politics, the significance of this is really important. And so my mom, so yesterday people talked about their moms that were born in the 20s. My mom's a little bit a generation later, not quite a generation later. She was born in 1936. And she was among the first of the working mothers. Not really the first, because there have always been working mothers. They're not always the ones who are writing books, writing articles, getting covered, but there have been working mothers all along. And my mom was also quite a writer, and then when she died, I went through her computer because I knew she'd been writing stuff for us, and I wanted to share some of her insights about being a working mom in the 1950s and the 1960s. So the circumstance of my mother's being a working mom was this. She said, at 15, I was married and pregnant to my teenage sweetheart, who after he became an Atlanta cop, became an abusive alcoholic. She said, what we called back then a drunk, a wife beater, and white trash. My mother didn't mince words. So she went to work. She had to. I went to work at a very low age to support my 3 little children. On a daily trip, which would take an hour and a half, I rode a streetcar and a bus to my work in North Atlanta. Then I struggled to support the children as best I could, including serving drinks in a dive on the weekends. This is the significant part of the story, about her own understanding about the place of women in society. All women. She said, one hot summer afternoon as I was taking the first of several buses home from my low-paying job as a public secretary. The cleaning ladies and I kept the same schedule. Out early in the morning and back home in the late afternoon, weary and exhausted, to prepare dinner for children who must then be fed, loved, bathed, and put to bed. After that came the laundry and the housework. I'd gotten on this bus, hot, sweaty, and tired, a long way from home, and took a seat next to a window to get some air. At the next stop, another lady got on the bus too. She was hot and sweaty and very tired and a long way from home, only she was a colored woman, going home for her work for another woman. And she sat down next to me. I stood up and remained standing. And standing, she said, I looked down at her. I saw her scruffy old shoes, the runs in her stockings, her hands worn and rough like my own. I saw the sweat on her face and her weariness, her slumped shoulders, her resignation to my insult, and I was embarrassed at myself, sick and ashamed at what I had done. Who was I that I wouldn't sit next to this other woman, weary like myself, going home to scrape together supper for her children, worrying how to stretch her meager pay for all of the needs of her little family, probably hoping that he would not come home for dinner tonight. And it came to me that we were all the same, us women. We rode these buses, those hot, unair-conditioned buses, miles from our homes to work for others. We all had little children to support, and usually a drunk to fight off, but we were the same. We were women, white and black, and we were alike in ways that men never are. And I was changed. So this was my mother's revelation in the early 1960s in the Deep South about see, you hear it in my voice, about what her role and the universal role of women has been. My mother parlayed her secretarial skills that she, fortunately, her father had sent her to secretary school, recognizing that she wasn't going to get supported in the way women should be. So she parlayed those secretarial skills over many years. She became the executive secretary. She was running the companies, but she was still the secretary. She was a brilliant woman, my mother. She finally became a successful media salesperson, and she got the Rolex watch, by golly, by working very, 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 very hard. And she spent her life also then, once she was a successful saleswoman, mentoring other women in a profession that was still mostly dominated by men at that time. Maybe still is, I don't know. Mentoring women, helping them, making changes within the corporation. Her parent company was 3M. She marched in the streets for women's reproductive rights. She wrote articles, and when she retired, she was working for Clean Water in North Georgia, for the lake that she worked in. So my mom took this, what she always joked about, being barefoot and pregnant at 16, took that reality of her life and made something significant and contributed in a major, major way. So for her, Hillary Clinton heading the ticket of the Democratic Party, and my mother was a fierce Democrat her whole life. Even when the South went Republican, Beth did not. And she was famous in her neighborhood for being a little bit far to the left and speaking her mind about things. But she would be so proud that a woman, not of her generation, but of my generation, because of her effort, because of her recognition, because of the efforts of women who went to school and the women who didn't go to school, because of the efforts of the women who went to clean houses and the women who went to type pieces of paper for people, all of them. It's built on that movement over the last 100 years? Well, maybe longer. I think it's critically important to add that this woman that was cleaning someone's house, that in relationship to my mother's worldview changed, probably did not get a Rolex watch in her lifetime. It's important to add that there were certain privileges that my mother had on the basis of her race, regardless of where she had come from, that made it more possible for her to parlay her early experiences into something that, but in a worldly way, was successful. There are black women who also have led the way. I think of Barbara Jordan right now as the person who came to mind as leading the way as a political figure who's been so inspirational and did so much. So there are those too. But that possibility to be able to parlay our difficulties is still not even across our country. And that's why we have to continue to fight. And that's why we even have to talk about this. Because we have to talk about where we've come from, and it has to be in the context of where we still are going. Yeah, but that was important to add. Yeah, so in honor of my mother's effort, and also really thinking of her pride in women's advancement, I just offer that revelation from my mom.